In the long, painful shadow of the Atlantic slave trade, there were ships, there were shackles, there was suffering, but there were also merchants. Men, African and European, who profited from the sale of human lives. And Badagry, the coastal town on the edge of what is now Lagos State, Nigeria, was one of the busiest markets in this trade. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Badagry had become more than a fishing village. It became a hub of commerce, a crossroads for cultures, and tragically, a center for slave trading. European ships arrived from Portugal, Britain, France, and Brazil, not with peace, but with cargo, mirrors, alcohol, cloth, muskets, and gunpowder. And they came for something far more valuable, people. But the Europeans didn't capture the slaves themselves. They bought them from Africans. From chiefs, from middlemen, from warriors who raided neighboring villages. Sometimes, prisoners of war were sold. Other times, it was betrayal. A neighbor. A rival. Even a family member could sell someone into slavery, for wealth, for weapons, for power. The trade stretched far beyond Badagry. Captives came from deep in the interior, through Yoruba lands, Dahomey, Oyo, Egba, and Egun territories. They were walked for days, weeks, chained, starved, broken. Until they reached the coast, until they reached Badagry. There, they were held in barracoons, dark, hot cells where they waited to be loaded onto ships. In this grim marketplace, there were African merchants who rose to power. One of the most infamous was Seriki Williams Abass, once a slave himself, later a wealthy trader. He, like others, became a middleman between Europeans and the captives. He used his knowledge of Portuguese to negotiate. He built wealth, with over 100 wives, land, and a personal slave barracoon. But he was not alone. There were others, Chief Mobee, Chief Posu, Chief Alagbo. These men were known to exchange hundreds of lives for goods and influence. They built alliances with European captains. They facilitated the sale. They enabled the transport. And in doing so, they became merchants of flesh. The Europeans, for their part, saw Africa not as a continent of culture, but as a supplier of labor. They kept records. They calculated profits. Each enslaved person was a line on a ledger, a number in a shipment. Ships left Badagry full, and returned again. Each journey a transaction. Each stop, a cost paid in human suffering. But to speak honestly, and this must be said, the blame was not only foreign. Africans played a role. It is a truth that is uncomfortable, but necessary. Because truth is not always easy, but it is always essential. Today, in Badagry, you can visit the Mobee Royal Family Museum, the Seriki Abass Barracoon, and the Point of No Return. They stand not just as tourist sites, but as reminders, as warnings, as witnesses to what was done. This is not just the story of what the Europeans did to Africa. It is also the story of what Africans did to one another. Of how power and profit blurred the lines between victim and villain. Of how some survived by selling others. And how a town like Badagry became both a victim of history and a participant in it. We must tell this story not to cast blame, but to honor the truth. To understand the system of slavery, a web woven across cultures, continents, and centuries. To remember the voices silenced, the lives lost, and the choices made. This is Badagry. This is the story of merchants, of traders, of a legacy wrapped in chains and truth. Subscribe to African Folktales by RHMZ for more untold African stories, where we speak not only of glory, but of the full weight of our past.